Okay, so now we're on to drums and bass. We're going to record the drums and bass at the same time just to get a little bit of performance relationship and be able to work out the rhythm section stuff at the same time. So what we've done is, obviously we've changed over from where our guitar amps were. I've got a drum kit in here. Chase is going to play drums for us today. And we've set up our microphones. I haven't placed them yet. I just kind of wanted to do that with you guys and talk to you about it. And so we've line checked everything, meaning that we've hooked it all up and we've just verified that we're getting signal from each microphone into through our record paths into the computer. I'm just going to move around the kit and place microphones, and I'll talk a little bit about how and why I'm placing things where I am. First thing I'll do is the hi-hat. So I know you can't really see it very well, but if you imagine that this is the top of the hi-hat looking down on it, I usually, and this is the center where the stem is, I usually place it about halfway out. I never get really inside of halfway out. Sometimes you want to move out towards the edge if you want to hear a little bit more of that crisper, washier sound of the hi-hats, but in the middle between the center and the edge kind of gives you a little bit of a tighter, crisper feel. It just depends on what you're after. And then in terms of like proximity to the hi-hats, I don't know, 4 to 6 inches above. I kind of have it pointing straight down because, and I have it on away from the snare drum as much as possible, out of the drummer's way. When you're miking drums, some things you need to consider about placement is that where the snare drum is and where the microphone is, the hi-hat is in between. And I know that may sound very obvious, but the hi-hat is acting like a baffle. It's casting a shadow, if you will, from the sound the snare drum's making to the microphone. And so, I mean, obviously we're still going to get snare drum bleed because the snare drums are going to be very loud. But it's like where you place the microphones in these really close applications where we're putting a lot of mics on the drums, having it over here in a spot where it's farther away from like the snare drum, which is probably the loudest drum relative in the kit relative to what all the microphones are going to pick up, depending on obviously how loud the cymbals are played. So the next thing I'm going to do is place the snare drum mic, and just for clarity of demonstration, if this is the top of the snare drum looking down, I'm using an SM57. This is a condenser. I'll go just back to the hi-hat real quick. This is a small diaphragm condenser mic. I'm choosing this because I know that I want a very crisp, bright, articulate hi-hat sound. Sometimes I'd put a 57 here if I wanted something that was just a little bit darker and vibier and wasn't looking for so much articulation. But this is rock music. The cymbals are very important and what's going on with the hi-hat. So I want the detail. I'm going to end up rolling a lot of low frequencies off of this to get rid of the bleed from the other drums and really just focus on the crispness and clarity of the hi-hat. So we have a small diaphragm condenser here. I'm using an SM57 on the snare drum. This is the top of the snare drum if we're looking down on it, okay? And I'm putting the microphone about an inch over the drum and about an inch above it. And just kind of, so it's a bit like this, okay? And the angle of it is sort of somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees, okay? I don't want the microphone looking too much into the drum, because if you do that, it's going to get a lot of a heavy tone. Well, it's not that you don't want to do it, just the reality of it is that you're going to get a lot of heavy tone this way. If it's flatter across the drum, you're just going to get a lot more brightness. So I'm kind of trying to split the difference, and getting it over the drum just a little bit helps get some of the tone of the attack and the head, as opposed to if it's I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to mic the snare drum pulled back a little bit, but in doing that I'm going to get more sound of the shell here from it. So that's how I'm placing this. And I hopefully don't have to use that as a prop every time, but these are things that are a little bit farther away, so I just want to give you a little bit of information there. This is a TL2, an AKG TL2, which is very similar to an AKG 414. And it's in the same body as an AKG 414, but it is, and this is a phantom-powered large diaphragm condenser. There's no tube involved in it. What's special about a TL2 is it has a C12 capsule, which is a large diaphragm condenser mic, tube condenser mic. So the character of this mic is it's very bright, and it's going to get a lot of articulation and snap out of these toms. And I'm going to put it over the drum a bit, and it's as opposed with a snare drum mic is kind of looking down in the drum. This is kind of pulled back and looking. The angle of it is looking more a little bit towards the center, but I'm getting it pretty well over the drum, and I'm getting that proximity effect. Where you get a mic kind of close to something, you're going to get like the low end. So I'm using a microphone that has a lot of high frequency detail, and I'm putting it in kind of tight so that it gets a lot of the good tone and low end from the drum. You can use dynamic mics. This is a rock song, so we want that sort of rock punch and articulation. So I'm choosing a brighter mic with good full frequency detail and putting it in kind of tight, so I get a big punchy articulate sound. You could put 57 here, 421s. There's all kinds of mics you can use in a tom, and those are choices you'd make to sort of influence the sound. I encourage you to experiment and sort of learn the equipment you have and know what it's good for. So just kind of continuing on around the drums. Okay, so the kick drum. We're just going to use one microphone. A lot of people record kick drums with multiple mics, and sometimes that can be cool. You get into phase issues and blending the sound. Some people put a microphone way inside. That can be good and appropriate for certain styles of music, like heavier rock, metal, where you want like a lot of articulation from the beater hitting the head. I feel like I can, if I place this mic in the right spot, I'm still going to get plenty of inside the drum sound. But I also want to get a little bit of the full sound of the drum, the front of the, some of the resonance in the front head a little bit too. A lot of times what people are doing when they're using multiple mics on a kick drum is they've got one way up inside so they can get the beater sound, and they've got one back here so they can get the outside sound, and then they're combining them. Well, you certainly do get those two distinct sounds to combine, but it's also a trade-off that you're miking the same instrument very close, but not together, so that the sound is not all arriving at the same point. So in the microphone that's very inside, you're going to get a lot of articulation, high frequency detail. On the mic that's on the outside, you're going to get a lot of low end and warmth. So that's the extremes of the sound that you're going to be able to combine. But they're going to also share a lot of frequencies and tone in between, and because they're hearing it differently, it's going to add up and subtract from each other. You're going to get some filtering and some phasing going on, and so it's not as good of a sound as just one microphone for me. That's sort of my opinion and take. I'd rather do the work to set the drum up the right way, get it tuned properly, use the right beater. You can use a wood beater, you can use a soft felt beater, you can use a hard felt beater. You can put a piece of cloth, you can put some tape on that, you can put some piece of cloth on there to soften it up. There's all kinds of ways. You can take the front head off. It's really about setting the drum up the right way and get it tuned the right way, and having the drum make the sound that you want to capture, as opposed to manufacturing it all with microphones and EQs. It's a balance. It's a concentrating on the source. So the way I'm going to place this, and I've explained a lot for a kick drum, but a kick drum is one of the most important parts of capturing a drum kit well. And the hardest thing that you're going to have to achieve in mixing is the low end, and getting the low end of the bass and the low drums, whatever's playing the low frequencies of the instrumentation and the chordal movement, and then whatever is keeping the low end rhythm, getting that right and that relationship good is a big challenge in mixing in the finished product, and that's the difference between something that's okay and something that's great. So it can be a very complicated thing, and I oftentimes you have to end up changing microphones to just sort of get the right capture instead of using multiple mics. Just experiment with what microphone you're using. My goal is to capture a little bit of that inside sound, a little bit of the outside sound, and so I'm just going to put this mic just inside the drum a little bit, and I'm going to have it. I'm going to focus where it's pointed at. You can see how it's pointed up a little bit. It's pointed at the beater, so that it's very focused on those high frequencies and that detail coming from there. But then as the sound is developing through the whole drum, I've also got the microphone out here. Now, some people worry about having a microphone out front and leakage. It's okay because, like I described with the hi-hat, it's creating a little bit of a shadow from what the snare is delivering to the hi-hat mic. This hole is cut low. That's purposeful because it's getting the microphone down as far away from the other stuff, and you've got all of this surface that's acting kind of as a baffle and a shadow. So let's move along here. This floor tom mic is the same kind of microphone as we have on the rack tom, and so similar kind of placement where we're over the drum. Look, over the drum pretty tight, so because we want that low frequency bump, and we're looking towards, the angle of the mic is sort of focused a little bit more on the middle. Okay, so if you remember from talking about our Ford Terrell song, I talked about the AEA stereo ribbon mic. This is that microphone. You've got a long ribbon here and another ribbon here. They're stacked on top of each other. They're in an XY kind of pattern. And you can do that. You can do that with two separate. You can take like two 120 Royer 121s, and you can take them and put them like this, and kind of achieve the same thing. That microphone technique is called Bloomline. You can kind of look it up and do a little bit of homework on that. It's a very cool technique. It's because ribbon mics here in front and back, and the way that you have two of them and the way they're stacked, it's kind of hearing all around, but in a very particular way that's kind of cool. So I'm going to use this as my overhead because I like I said, I'm not as big a fan for most of the time of space pairs. Might do that if the drum kit was much bigger. Genre appropriate, and I had kind of more to capture out here on the edges. Like if we were recording Neil Peart, or a drummer that had like a big giant drum kit, then yeah, I'd probably have to put up a couple overheads. But I want to keep my overhead picture focused over the top of the kit, get a really balanced sound that really details the snare drum a lot and keeps my snare drum focused in the middle. Now, I'm kind of just placing this in a general spot where I know it's pretty good. You kind of have to be aware of ceiling height because we're we have I think these are 8 or 9 foot ceilings. So it's something to be aware of. If you're in a much bigger room, it's like less of a concern. If you're recording in something that has even lower ceilings, something to think about because the sound of the drums is coming off the floor. It's happening kind of here, obviously, but it's coming off the floor and then hitting the ceiling and coming back. If this microphone is like right in the middle well, then you've kind of got these frequencies kind of arriving and colliding, and sound, and you might get a little bit of cancellation. So I'm erroring on a little bit lower than halfway, and because I want a tight focused sound. I don't want it so tight that I'm missing everything in the stereo image. And then in that way, I think, just in thinking about it, talking about it, I'm going to tilt this back a little bit so that as I have the mic lower in the space between the floor and the ceiling, and I tilt it back like that, then I've backed the mic off from the width of the drums, so that hopefully it's going to capture everything. And I'm going to cheat it over towards, because I've got the hi-hat mic, and obviously there's a rack tom and a floor mic, a snare mic and a rack tom mic. Only thing I really have on this side of the kit is the floor tom, so I kind of want to just make sure that this is capturing this side of the drums really well as well, because I'm going to have the ability to pan my hi-hat and get some image out of that. So there's two more things. This is a harp mic. This is a green bullet. It's a harp mic. It's a harmonica mic. We've got this. I'm going to want to set this up so it goes through a guitar pedal in the control room. I'm just going to put this on the floor, somewhere near the drums, and we'll have to listen to it. I'm just trying to get, it's going to be a very mid-rangey sound. I've put it over on this side so that I have these drums acting a little bit as a baffle away from the hi-hat and the snare, which are going to be really loud. And I kind of want to get a little bit of that mid-rangey sound. I guess you could refer back to the Ford Terrell song where I pulled up a similar sort of lo-fi mic, and when we turned it on and off, it added a lot of sonic value and kind of mid-range tone to the drum kit to fill out all of these close, very detailed microphone sounds. And then the last thing is I have another stereo mic, this AKG, I think it's a 4050 stereo microphone. It's not an AKG, excuse me. This is an Audio-Technica, Audio-Technica 4050 ST, which just means stereo. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave this door cracked. This room is very tight and controlled sounding. It's not dead, but the sound is kind of controlled in here. And we're going to leave this door cracked, and I'm going to put this out in the hallway. The drums are going to sound very ambient and reverberant out there. And so then this mic will give me the ability to kind of balance in a natural big room tone without having to actually be in a big space. It's kind of, I'm using the hallway as a little bit of an echo chamber or as a reverb element of the drums so that I can add size and dimension to them. So I'm just going to open the door and I'm just going to put it just out there. I think that about covers it as starting out. We'll obviously need to we're going to go in the control room, get some levels and tones. And if I have to come out here and make any small adjustments, I'll just kind of come back in and tell you about it. If we do anything major, then we'll document it and reveal it to you. And like I said, we'll take a photograph of each mic placement and our final mic choice if we do change anything, just so you have an awareness about that. So just a couple other points of discussion while we're in here. If you've only got a few microphones, let's say we have 3 microphones. I sort of talked about this before, but you got 3 microphones. You put one on your kick drum, one on your snare drum, and then let's say you have a large diaphragm condenser microphone for recording vocals and stuff. Use it as an overhead. Now, depending on your space or what's important in terms of the focus of the drum elements and the performance. I mean, maybe you're doing something that you only have one cymbal, or you don't have any cymbals and you're just playing kick, snare, hi-hat. Well, it might be good to put that one overhead over here to kind of get get some ambient detail from the kick and the snare, but also have it focused on the hi-hat. And even though that it's over here, you can still pan everything up the middle, or you can kind of push the overhead off to one side. The Glyn Johns technique, which we discussed before, is a microphone here and then another microphone here. It's better if they're the same type of microphone. If my hand is the microphone, and I sort of was talking about the Glyn Johns technique, so my hand is the microphone, it's like right here, looking across the floor tom at the snare drum, and then the microphone that's over top, if you measure from the center of the snare to this microphone, you want this microphone to be the same distance. So it's very easy. Just take a mic cable and hold, just like hold it here and stretch it out to where this mic is, and then you can just go up here and then adjust. You're going to adjust to get them to equal distance from the center of the snare drum. And the reason to do that is that it will somewhat, depending on how you pan these two mics, will keep the focus a bit better for the snare drum. This microphone is going to hear a bit more of the kick drum and the floor tom. This microphone is going to hear a bit more of the snare and a bit more of the rack tom and hi-hat. This will also additionally hear a ride cymbal or whatever's over here. But keeping them equal distant from the snare drum, because the snare drum is the most, it's the loudest drum in the kit, and it is has the most transient and brightness. That's the one that matters the most in terms of placement of sort of overhead type of mics. If you have a track that has a lot of, like you've built a track and it's a little bit more pop, and you've got a lot of samples, but you want to add the energy of a drum kit performance, sometimes I'll put up a kick and snare mic just so that I know where I get a good sound, but I know where the hits are and the rhythm of things is really definitely. But then I'll just put an overhead mic up somewhere just to mostly get some cymbal wash and some overall sound of the drums, and then I'll record a drum performance to the programming. And the programming is meant to stay loud and very present, and the drums are just meant to support and give energy to it. And in that kind of acoustic recording with the drums, I've balanced, I may not even use my kick and snare microphone recordings. I may just use those to help me do some editing and kind of line some things up. I would mostly work to put this overhead microphone in a place that caught the overall energy of the drums and the balance of the drums, and was focused on kind of the cymbals and just the energy of the performance to add to a track. And maybe if I have the kick and snare close mics in there, just blend them in a little bit to give a little bit more weight to that picture of the overhead. Or if you want something that's even more ambient, you could put put a close mic on the kick and snare, and we're still on the sort of more of adding a drum kit to some drum programming, but just to give it a little bit of a performance feel, a little bit of energy and additional sound. You could put a microphone or a pair of microphones out in the room and kind of looking at the drum kit this way, just whatever might be a cool capture for that application. It really is about experimentation. It's case by case. You really should concentrate on making custom sounds as much as possible. Don't be afraid to experiment. Record boldly, and it's better to go for something and not quite get there, and then have to redo it, as opposed to play everything safe and not really have something that's sort of unique and stands out. Even if you kind of miss the mark a little bit, with a little bit of creative thought and putting a little bit of energy into it, you can usually get something to work out and right the ship and add something really positive and unique to your production.